You think a good futurist would know when the airline was going to not deliver your bag with yourself and make other contingencies, but no, it's a little unpredictable, so I'm wearing my travel clothes for that reason. The content remains the same. Okay, so, let's go back a bit. So I'm going to talk about the future of you, because when you think about the future, what do you think of typically? Probably jetpacks and flying cars and rockets and space colonies and things like that. But you don't usually, maybe that's changing now, younger readers of science fiction perhaps, but for most people, don't really think about us changing. And a classic example of that is Star Trek. If you think about Star Trek, whether it's the 23rd or 24th century versions, they have this amazing technology that can go faster than light, travel to other galaxies. You can step into a beam that will shred you into atoms, beam it across space, and reconstruct you. And yet these people have done nothing interesting with it. They still age and die about the same rate that we do. They seem to still have some illnesses. They still have mental problems. They really haven't changed at all. It's kind of remarkable, having that kind of advanced technology. And I don't think that's really very realistic. So there are different kinds of futures. You know, if you don't have any real change, this is human change, the one that usually gets ignored in a lot of traditional views of the future, and technological change. So with neither, you've got not much change at all, stasis. If you have human change without technology changing, you have what I call New Age futures. That's the idea that if we sit down and go, long enough, then we will become spiritually awakened, the world will be transformed for the better, and human nature will be changed. Well, I'm not saying there's nothing to that at all, but there are certain limits on that. Now, the standard futures, again, Star Trek, we haven't changed. The more interesting futures, I think, are the transhuman futures. Those are the futures in which we've applied technology to ourselves. So we've transformed the human being in its various different facets. Now, you may have heard the term singularity, and I'd like to distinguish that from transhumanism. Transhumanism is a broader view of human possibility. The singularity is a very specific model of where the future is going to come from. This idea that technological change will go like this, and it will suddenly take off and accelerate at an exponentially fast rate until essentially the rate of change is vertical. So things are happening incredibly quickly. You don't have to believe that particular model of change to accept something like a transhumanist view, that we're going to radically change human nature as well as the outside world. Okay, so transhumanism, basically, what is that? It's kind of a long, rather awkward term. You can think of it either as transhumanism or as transhumanism, because it has roots in classical humanism. It embodies values of progress, a belief that by using our rational minds and a bit of goodwill, we can make the world a better place. That's part of classical humanism. It tends not to have any religious ideas. It doesn't necessarily take a position on that. There are actually religious humanists as well, but it's basically saying we have to rely not on revelation or faith or higher beings to fix the world for us. We have to do it ourselves. So that's part of its tradition. But it's also transhumanism because it has a very strong view that we can become radically different than what we are. We can change what we've evolved into by taking charge of that, by using advanced technologies as they become available, and actually change the human condition fundamentally. There's a couple of ideas here that are, I think, central to transhumanism, which sound kind of fancy, but they are kind of fancy ideas, so you need a fancy word for them. Morphological freedom is both a description and a value. As a value, it really means that we should have the right to choose our own selves, who we are. So no central organization or professional association, no doctor should tell us who we have to be, or how our body functions, how our mind functions, how our emotions work. We should get to choose that for ourselves. And hyperagency was actually termed by a critic of transhumanism, interestingly enough, but I like the term because it sounds like a superpower. I want hyperagency, it's like super strength or flight. Hyperagency really means that you have agency applied to every aspect of yourself. It's hyper because it encompasses everything. You get to choose your body, your mind, your emotions, pretty much everything. So let's look at a few types of enhancement very quickly. Obviously, we can't go into any detail on any of these areas, but somatic enhancement, one of the more obvious ones, changes to the body. And that includes things like structural aspects. What if you could use some kind of advanced nanotechnology to go into your bones and reinforce your bones with diamond fibers? That's an idea that's been seriously discussed. And if you look up nanomedicine on the web, you'll see some interesting work by Robert Freitas describing how you could, probably not too far in the future, build these little devices, respirocytes, that let you hold your breath for a couple of hours, go swim underwater probably for 15 minutes without a breath. Again, the diamond, imagine that in your skull, so that a truck could roll over your head and you go, oh, that was a little uncomfortable. It wouldn't do any real damage. So there's all kinds of possibilities for changing the way the body, the resilience of the body and how it functions. A heightened immune system, enhanced senses. You're getting some idea of how that might work already, thanks to things like Google Glass, where you can put those on and essentially have a virtual overlay on the actual world to get a lot more information. It could presumably take things like, if you had a device for reading infrared, you could maybe beam it at someone's face. You could see how much blood flow was in their face, and you could tell whether they were lying or embarrassed or something else like that. That would be an enhancement to your senses. So that may be built into us. It may be using external devices or some combination of the two. I think this will also include things like true change of sex or gender. People have gender changes right now, and I know several transgender people, but there are limits to it because you have to take hormones in a kind of a crude external way that can cause side effects. You may not be able to change your height. A man who wants to become a woman but is 6'4" may not be entirely satisfied with the results. What if we could actually change things on a really fundamental level, even a genetic level, so you could truly be the gender you wanted? So I think those are some of the many possibilities that are gradually unfolding. We're just in the very early stages of this. Right now, we can't even build a whole artificial organ very well, although if you look at the papers coming out, it's pretty amazing how many types of tissue are being grown in the lab, and we'll probably one day be able to replace failing body parts. So this whole idea of tissue engineering and regenerative medicine is taking off pretty quickly. So I'm talking a little bit further out, but the applications of that further in the future. Cognitive enhancement, also pretty useful. Again, people in the Star Trek universe are really not that smart. I mean, these are the best and the brightest who've been through the Starfleet Academy. They're supposed to be super smart. And apart from Spock and one or two others, they're not really very bright. They don't see any smarter than us. They make the same stupid mistakes. They can't, if you read them out, say 100 words or numbers in a row, they wouldn't be able to remember more than the first few. And if I started doing that right now, you might remember the first few numbers, maybe 7. That's about all our short-term memory can keep in mind. That's pretty lousy. A computer can hold billions and billions and billions and recite them back. So we have very poor working memory. We have a very poor ability to concentrate, sometimes worse than others. We can't really choose what kind of mental state we're in. Wouldn't it be handy if you were learning a new language or some new skill, and you could just put your mind in the right position, the right frame to totally concentrate for the next 3 hours with no distractions? Wouldn't it be great if you could turn down other factors like your sex drive or your hunger, so they're not so distracting for that period, then turn them back up. Then when you go out Friday night, you can turn that sex drive back up, ready to party. But we don't have much choice over that. These things happen to us. Our moods come and take us, and it can be very frustrating. So probably by, say, getting into the hippocampus, if you look at the work of Ted Berger over at USC, he's been working on artificial neurons and being able to integrate these artificial neurons with their own biological neurons to, his first goal actually is to help people with brain damage. So you've damaged part of the brain and you can no longer control your limbs properly. The idea is to replace part of the motor cortex with these synthetic neurons. And they actually learn from the biological neurons and mimic those around them. But what if we could go further? And Ted himself will discuss these possibilities. Maybe we could do something with the hippocampus, expand your memory capacity, expand your ability to hold long chains of reasoning in your mind. You could become essentially super intelligent. You could probably hold complex thoughts in mind and focus on them better than you ever could before. So there's all kinds of possibilities in that area. Another interesting one is refined emotion. Part of the transhumanist vision really is that we should get to choose how we feel. Right now, tremendous numbers of people suffer from anxiety and depression and all kinds of mental disorders, either full-blown or on a lesser level. We can't really control the way we feel. We can't influence it very well. People can say, don't worry, be happy, but that would probably just make you angry. You tell them to go away, because we can't do that. All these connections come from the emotional centers to the cognitive centers of the brain, because basically if you saw a tiger running at you, you want to feel fear, you want that to make you run away. We don't have many connections going in the other direction. So we can't really understand where these feelings are coming from. Maybe you're having an irrational fear, but you can't just make it go away. If you see a spider behind glass, it can't possibly get to you. If you have a phobia, you're still going to feel terrified, even if you know that doesn't make sense, but you can't turn it off. We don't have those pathways. What if we could rewire our brain, put in new pathways, so we could actually modulate our emotions, turn them up or down, rather than going through very, very costly and long therapy or aversion therapy or something else that might or might not work. Which is pretty good for phobias, but not for much else. So these ideas of hyperagency, choosing everything about ourselves, morphological freedom, choosing the form and function of your body. A lot of people don't really like this. They say, oh my goodness, my life is complicated enough already. Now I've got to have to choose how my body functions, how my mind works, how intelligent I am, what kind of mood I'm in. Oh my goodness. So it's a kind of ultimate responsibility. Since my background is actually philosophy, it makes me think of the old existentialist idea that we choose ourselves at every moment, which of course is not actually true, because it completely ignores the whole biological aspect of human beings. We don't create ourselves every second. But I think these kinds of directions that I'm talking about as moving in take us in that direction. We will become increasingly self-choosing. We're no longer better blame the past for who we are. Now, I'm not giving you all the evidence and back of all this ideas, so I will give you a good reference at the end, though, because obviously there's not time in 15 minutes to do that. So one thing, okay, so we talked about changing the body, the mind, emotions. So you get to choose what you're like, who you are. But what if you get to choose whether you are, whether you can continue? Now, you just heard a bit about anti-aging research and the possibility we could extend the healthy human lifespan, perhaps even eventually beyond the current maximum. Nobody's managed to beat about 122 years. What if we could actually reverse the aging process and live as long as we chose in good health? Well, so that really is, that's the goal. That's what you were, that's what you were hearing about over here. But what if you're not going to make it? Again, I've been picking on Star Trek a little bit. I'm going to pick on it a bit more here, because it's always really bugged me. 23rd century medicine, whenever somebody from the crew fell over and stopped breathing, McCoy would always kind of lean over them, go, run his scanner. Then he'd say, "He's dead, Jim." Well, how bloody useless. Why isn't he doing CPR? Why isn't he giving calcium channel block drugs? Why hasn't he got a defibrillator in that device? He never does anything. He should be fired. He could do something. One thing they could do is they could put people stored at very low temperatures until they can fix the problem. Right now, when we say someone's dead, like McCoy, that's not really true. If by dead you mean could never, ever be brought back, well, maybe we can't bring someone back from a certain condition today, but 50 years ago, we couldn't bring back people from all kinds of problems. People fell over, say someone here suddenly stopped breathing and fell over. 50 years ago, oh, they're dead. Now we won't do that. We'll probably, if there's anybody here with any medical training, they'll pants on them, start doing CPR. There's probably a defibrillator in the building. We'll call people in to take you somewhere else with more advanced technology where they can probably bring you back. In very many cases, we do. So were you dead? Well, no, not in any kind of ultimate sense. You were non-functional, but not dead. Now, even people who are declared dead today, clinically or legally dead, really that doesn't mean anything more than today's doctors with today's technology have thrown up their hands and said, there's nothing more I can do for this person. They've failed in some critical way. I can't fix them. It doesn't even mean that. They actually could bring them back sometimes, but there's no point because they're going to be miserable and they're going to die again soon. So they put what they call a no code, which means do not resuscitate, essentially. So you're not dead. All your cells pretty much are still alive. Maybe your heart stopped beating. Maybe cancer's taken out something critical. But that doesn't mean we should dispose of you. It doesn't mean we should make you worm food. What we can do instead is reduce your body temperature very quickly, take out the blood and body fluids, because they can crystallize and do a lot of damage to the cell membranes. And then once we've done that, we can drop temperature further very quickly, and then we can end up storing you in these large dewars at liquid nitrogen temperature, which is minus 196 degrees C, minus 320 Fahrenheit. At that temperature, you can wait 100 years, you can wait 1,000 years, and you'd be in essentially the same condition as when you started. Now, how much medical advance is going to be in 100 years or 1,000 years? A lot. So probably there's a good chance that by then we'll have figured out the aging process. We'll better bring you back in a de-aged body, a de-aged brain, having cured your condition, and set you on your way again. And that raises a billion questions, all of which I'll be happy to answer. But that's really all I can cover for now in there. So that's really our backup, right? We don't want to die in the first place. I don't like the idea of sitting in a tank of liquid nitrogen. I don't like that idea at all. I want to be in control of my own destiny. But if the option is to be eaten by worms or incinerated, it's a better option. So let's keep pushing anti-aging research. I'm all for that. I want to stay young. I just turned 50 2 days ago. So I'm just starting on my second half century. So it's getting urgent. So let's make some progress. So I may not make it. That's one reason why I took on this job of running Alcor Life Extension Foundation, even though I've been a member since 1986. And I run the thing because I'm getting older, and I'm not sure that anti-aging research is going to get there quick enough. I hope it will, but I may end up not making it. So my only option will be to stop things getting worse. And that's why we think of cryopreservation as extending emergency medicine. That's really what it is. It's not some strange thing of freezing dead people, because we don't regard them as dead. They're patients what we want to do is something very conservative. It might seem odd to say it's conservative, but it is. We're conserving the patient. We're stopping things from getting worse and giving the future a chance to bring them back. So this has obviously a lot of different ideas. I kind of skimmed across very quickly. If you want to get one definitive source with dozens of different smart people writing about it, a book that I co-authored recently, The Transhumanist Reader, brings together, I think, about 42 different authors, lots and lots of these ideas in more depth. So you can certainly find out more. And if you have specific questions which aren't answered during this discussion we're about to have, please contact me and I'll be happy to answer them. So the bottom line is the future is not just going to be one where the world has changed, it's going to be one where you have changed too. That requires some thinking. Thank you.
Thanks, Max. I'm going to call